thank you very much. Firstly, to all the staff and also obviously our valued clients for taking the time out to attend. Thank you very much to the panellists, and I hope everyone has a really enjoyable afternoon. And I might hand over to Rachael Dunne. Thank you, Rachael.
Thanks, Matt. Thank you for the words of introduction and setting the scene. So, as Matt said, please give generously in terms of Court House by bidding on that wonderful weekend. Our theme today is celebrating success and resilience in a year like no other. We've got three wonderful panellists here today, which we'll introduce to you shortly. But really, in celebrating success and resilience, we're here to understand through three very different experiences how our panellists have each dealt with the challenges that 2020 threw their way, both professionally and personally. Resilient leaders, both formally and informally leaders are. Resilient leaders are those who never give up no matter what. They're incredibly inspiring, and we're looking forward to hearing the experience of our panellists, which may not only be reflective of 2020, but experiences that have brought you to where you are now. And we also look forward to hearing how those experiences will place you in stepping through our new environment, the new COVID world. Our panellists for today, we're joined by Elisa Silbert. For the past 20 years, Elisa has held senior executive and leadership roles in consumer and sports marketing. Her leadership covers many industries, from media to sport, banking, telcos and alcohol brands. With a career that's seen her lead teams and projects in Australia, New Zealand and Hong Kong, Singapore and China, she's built iconic brands and award-winning advertising and content campaigns both locally and internationally. So whilst the corporate world brought a whole lot of satisfaction and certainly external success, after many years, Lisa decided to take the plunge into the world of entrepreneurialism and has recently opened Melbourne's newest and most innovative performance-based life practice. So combining the ancient practices of yoga and meditation with the latest modern advances in sound and light therapy. She has an incredible passion for helping young women navigate the business world with integrity, passion and authenticity. Throughout her career, she has built a reputation for building loyal, inspired and creative teams of people around her who can embody a healthy combination of resilience, innovation, ambition and empathy. Welcome.
Could have edited that,
Sorry. In the middle here, we're joined by Jamy. Jamy is the Vice President and Head of People and Culture at Luma, where she oversees the growth and development of all staff in both the Los Angeles and Melbourne studios. She has an extensive background in operations and marketing management with film industry in Australia, having worked at Luma, which is now Bethany Studios, as well as Film Victoria's Melbourne office. In 2012, Jamy joined Luma as their operations manager, where she took on the responsibility of recruiting, reviewing and growing individuals within the company. She was subsequently promoted to the head of people and culture and has spearheaded the creation of the culture department at Luma. In 2016, she was promoted to vice president and continues to create and execute company initiatives globally across both studios. With a focus on leadership, talent management and initiatives that support a culture of people first, Jamie's passions lie in ensuring that Luma provides engaging opportunities for great people to do their best work in the best creative environment possible. Thank you for joining us. Our final panellist for today, Nicole Fauvrelle. Welcome. Nicole's career spans 23 years, with 19 of those spent in the legal industry as a prosecutor in WA and Victoria, a senior lawyer with WorkSafe Victoria, followed by defence work in private practice for corporate clients across a number of industries in the private and public sectors. Nicole is currently the Director Head of Health, Safety and Wellbeing, and as well as the Chief Occupational Health and Safety Officer for the Department of Health. Nicole previously held this role for the Department of Health and Human Services prior to the split of that department in February this year. This role sets the health, safety and wellbeing direction, strategy and policy for the department, together with supporting and enabling the department's operations, including COVID response and recovery operations. Her most recent interest driver is wellbeing at work and focusing on organisational and team dynamics. So I'm sure you'll agree we've got very diverse and varied backgrounds, but I'm going to bring to us today some wonderful stories and experiences to show how they have how they've coped with resilience in these changing times in a year like no other, and the success that they've achieved on Okay, in relation to questions, I'm sure that for the audience here today and those that are joining us via link, there is a chat box function.
There is.
Yeah. So if you want to send in some questions along the way, please do so. We'd love to hear from you, and we will look to answer those towards the end of the session today. So in terms of bringing us all together, it'd be great to hear from you in your own words, a little bit about yourself, and perhaps touch on maybe 2 or 3 events that have helped shape your life. Is that would you like to start?
Sure. First of all, I feel like I've had a few lifetimes, careers, and sometimes when I hear the bio being read, I'm like, what's that really mean? Did I do those things? I started off, I graduated as a psychologist, actually, thinking I was going to be the next, Jodie Foster profiler. And quickly realised I'd be sitting behind the desk going to a pretty academic university, which was doing a lot of research. To be honest, it's weird now that I've come full circle back into kind of that field again, but at the time I wasn't quite ready for it. And I landed in the world of corporate. I sometimes reflect back and think a lot of what I did, what I did over those 20 years was better understanding the reasons why we as consumers, why we as people do things, and then developing advertising campaigns to, I guess, convince everyone to buy things. Sometimes good things, sometimes not so good, but I look back really fondly on my corporate career, even though I'm pretty honest and upfront about having some significant challenges within it. I feel like it's a story of 2 parts. The first part being as a junior, really excited person, having heaps of success, and the second half, as you come into being in more senior and executive roles, actually the reality of what you deal with on a day-to-day basis. Which everyone knows is a little less about your job day to day and more about how you can manage politics and influence and navigation. And I think in the spirit of what we're all here to talk about today, it wasn't without its challenges. So in terms of the things that have shaped my life and the things that have brought me, I guess, to this point, personally, I think I was about 21 when my dad passed away really suddenly. And that for me was a pivotal point in terms of growing up and realising the naivety of thinking I could control everything and everything was going to be okay as long as I tried hard. It just did overnight. The second one, probably professionally, was when I started at ANZ, and I spent my last 10 years at ANZ, again with incredible highs and lows. I joined ANZ at the time when Mike Smith had just joined, and we were growing the business from one domestic, or shouldn't forget New Zealand, Australia, New Zealand focus through to cross-regional Asia Pacific focus. And so that for me was a massive learning experience and pivotal point in my career, in my learning as a female and as a business person. The amount I was exposed to throughout my career at ANZ was just phenomenal, and I still look back and I know I wouldn't be here for the adversity, but also the immense support and success that I had for the time.
Thank you. Jamy?
I just had a light bulb moment actually, because I'm looking around everyone here at PwC and I was like, I could have actually been part of this company because I used to help Jules with her commerce exams back at uni. And I do recall retaining the information better than her. So, oh my God, maybe you could have been my colleague. But instead, I actually run a visual effects and creative studio in South Melbourne. Our parent company is in Santa Monica, and we make small films like The Avengers or all those little ones. And I think there's been 2 pivotal moments in my life where I can actually pinpoint to how I got here. One happened when I was quite young, at 3 years of age. My mum used to sit me down before bed and read me a fairy tale, and I was really into those sorts of books, as you are when you're a 3-year-old. But halfway through the story, she used to always close the book and say, "And then what happened?" And so I never knew the ending of like Snow White or Cinderella or Rapunzel until I actually got to school, because my mum would make me kind of make that story up, every night. So every night Snow White would be building a house, or Snow White would be having a coffee shop, or whatever I do at the time. And I remember in prep going to school and the teacher reading Snow White, and I was like, wait, what? This is the same story every day? Like, what's going on, guys? And I think back then she was really trying to instill in me that, there are some things that you have to work with, but what you do with that is your own doing, your hard work, your imagination, and your passion for your dreams. So something that, everybody has, and no one's story is ever really set out, on a certain path that's dictated to you for the rest of your life. And so I think I didn't realise it at the time, obviously when I was 3, but knowing that now, I think that's been a really big shaping force in my life. And then when I graduated, I come from a very strong Asian family that it was either a lawyer or a doctor that I had to be. And I don't like blood, so I went down the legal path and did all my exams while also helping Julie graduate as well. And I remember just doing my final exams where I can't see myself wearing a suit every day and going to this environment and doing this stuff. So I actually took a part-time job at Victoria, and there I was really fortunate enough to meet a lady by the name of Caroline Pitcher, who became my mentor, and she introduced me to a world of film and production and visual effects, and I was like, oh my God, people get paid to do this, like, without having to be an actor or a director. And so it just really spoke to me about being able to carve out a path in the creative industry. Although I'm not creative, I'm in a really fortunate position to be able to work with artists on a day-to-day basis and make movies. I think that it's a privilege, and it's not something that I take for granted at all. But having those women in my life has definitely shaped where I am today.
Thank you, and I love the analogy that our stories are all different. There's no one set correct ending. That's fabulous takeaway. Nicole, different journey again.
I have had a different journey again. As Jamy was talking, I was also thinking at one point in my legal studies where I really thought that what I wanted to do in life was securities regulation. So would have been also colleagues with this. But I quickly clicked on that. So I guess just thinking about my journey, so for as long as I can remember, early days, 6 years old, for some reason I had in my head that I wanted to be a lawyer. I come from an Islander family. My parents are Mauritian, and sort of similar thing. You're either going to be a doctor or you're going to be a lawyer. So I don't know whether it's planted by mum and dad or whether it was something that I really wanted to do, but it was something that I held on to and really wanted to study. It took a couple of goes to get into law, so that was probably the beginning of the, really thinking about if you really want to do something, do whatever you need to do it so that you can choose rather than waiting to be chosen. Finally got into law, did that whole fantasy of, I want to be in securities regulation, and then got to the end of my law degree, and it was a pretty competitive market out there in terms of getting your first graduate role. I was in WA at the time. I moved there to be with my now husband. And I was applying for jobs and just nothing was falling into place. And just on a whim, I thought, you know what, I'm going to put my name on the register for article clerks and see what comes up. And an opportunity came up to be one of the first article clerks for the Director of Public Prosecution's office in Perth. I got that gig. I was one of the first 2 to get that gig in the Crown Prosecutor's office, which is a pretty highly sought after role. And there began my love affair with very strong, empowering female mentors. They had an amazing training program where you're essentially in court every single day. So your learning ground by the time you got to your first day of court, which I remember was I was admitted to the Supreme Court of WA. My parents had flown across from Melbourne, and the next day I had a full caseload of 25 cases in the District Court of WA, wig and gown on, and off you go. And I remember not even being, sort of scared or apprehensive, because I'd had these amazing senior Crown prosecutors, women Crown prosecutors, who literally taken me under their wing and supported me and mentored me and told me what to look out for, and it was a really amazing experience. Fast forward sort of 18 or so years, and I got out of criminal prosecutions because it had quite a profound impact on me and my mental health, and it was time to make a decision to make a move and identify that I needed to get out of that, as enriching as it was. Moved into health and safety as a prosecutor, and then made a decision to go into the defence side in corporate land. And again, was very fortunate to be surrounded by some great female leaders, not just in the law firms that I was working in, but also through my clients. And interestingly, all of those industries that I worked in and supported were all very, very dominant industries, including the law, of course, but clients in construction, rail, logistics, transport, stevedoring. You don't get much blokier than putting your steel cap boots on and getting down on the docks in amongst it with your friends at the NUA or the CFMU. So again, I feel when I sort of reflect on this, I feel like those women mentors in a way sort of paved the way. I didn't go in with any trepidation. I didn't go in going, oh, this is a male-dominated industry. I need to act a certain way or change who I am to be successful. So I think becoming a Crown prosecutor in WA was a really pivotal point in my life. Something else that I think changed the way I view leaders and recovery at work in terms of a serious injury was my husband had been working overseas for about 4 years in Indonesia and in the Philippines. When he was in Jakarta, he had quite a serious accident over there. So the experience of repatriation, getting him back, surgery and rehab, and seeing the leaders around him who they were the ones that actually assisted him to get through that injury and recovery at work. And so that really focused my interest, I guess, in wellbeing at work, what that means, training and supporting leaders and people managers to engage with their people in a much more meaningful way. So essentially that wellbeing at work becomes about being the best that you can be with the people around you. So that's really driven my interest in landing in the Department of Health. The reaction from some people was, yeah, law must have been tough, you probably weren't cut out for it. And it's such a loaded, I felt that was such a loaded statement, because what they really were saying was you weren't resilient enough. So I think today's conversation around what is resilience, that it will ebb and flow, and that's okay. And sometimes resilience is actually about tapping out, knowing where to tap out.
I think that's a great point that you raised, and thank you for sharing that with us. We had sort of touched on earlier resilience as a concept of being coming in waves, that Jamy, you referred to it as, rather than being just a continuum, it's not just you've done something, it really is something you need to dig into when it's required, but you're not all the time. It's just said to Nicole, part of resiliency is recognising when to sort of shut that off and step aside, whether it be because you want to embrace a new challenge or a different chapter. In terms of resilience as a concept of waves, is there spend a point any particular instances in your experience working with Zink?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been really interesting for us because even in the COVID year, we hired 150 artists globally. And, while it's amazing to be able to give all these artists a home and continue their work and not lay them off and, roll their workstations into their kitchens and all that kind of stuff. There was a question on the sheet that said, would you have done anything differently had you known that this was going to come up? And there's 50,000 things I would have done differently, but one of the main ones is to really find out if our people had the right emotional and psychological and mental health skills to be able to all of a sudden be yanked out of their workplace and not have this interaction and feel isolated while also dealing with a health pandemic. Because the resilience thing, yeah, sure, be resilient during a overtime period where we have to get that movie out the door. Be resilient when your machine crashes a couple of times. Being resilient while you have kids running around on a Zoom, trying to do your work in your Uggs, while also not eating and taking a break. That kind of thing on a day-to-day basis is just unheard of, I think. And so I think resilience, it's meant to be a positive word, but I think so many people are fatigued with how resilient they have to be 7 days a week for not only their jobs, but their family and their friends. I think that being able to take a step back and take a breather and be like, hey, I'm not okay today, or I need a break today, or can someone help me, is, I think, one of the biggest things that we'll learn out of this pandemic. I listened to a podcast and they're like, resilience is not meant to be 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And that's so true. You're meant to have these pockets so you can actually reflect or breathe or take some time out or have some fun. And I think that anyone who's made it this far after the last 12 months, everybody deserves some kind of medal because it's been a real effort as a community. So.
Thank you, that's great insights. Lisa, what are your own experience with the resilience and the concept of being raised, the static force to be grown against?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's such an amazing description of what we've all been through, the waves. And I think just listening to you talk now and reflecting again, I've actually gone back to complete my psych degree in my master's since I started 20 years ago. So what I'm about to say is quite fresh in my mind. But what happens when we're constantly pushing through, whether we're aware of it or not, but all those things that you mentioned and more, and then you throw in financial hardship, then you throw in domestic violence, then you throw in all the things that are rife throughout communities, it's trauma. And so it's like we have two different types of trauma with a little t and trauma with a big T. And everyone experiences little t trauma every day. You go and you go to catch a train, it's not on time, shit. Enough of those little traumas and you have an outburst. But let's make no mistake, what we've all been through the past 12 months, it's trauma with a big T. And so for me, I feel, certainly in what I do now, my conversation has kind of changed from resilience to how do we rewire our nervous systems and repattern our nervous systems to deal with major trauma that has happened in our lives. If we're all running around with big T trauma, what are our kids experiencing? And so I guess in answer to your question, I have a particular passion now is how do we actually calm our nervous systems, and it's not just go and do a meditation class, although we do offer that. Everything that happens inside ourselves is remembered, and the way you behave in a client interaction at home or with your colleagues is all the result of trauma being reactivated again. And so whether you know it or you're not, it's happening. And so the work I'm doing at the moment is just about befriending your nervous system and knowing the things that are actually going to trigger you. Just another buzzword. But yeah, I think if we can all recognise that what we've been through is individual trauma as well as societal trauma, I think that's the first step towards becoming more resilient and actually being able to recognise the enormity of the challenge that, without being doomsday, the enormity of the challenge we face with the children that we all have in our care, whether biological or not, because they're going to absorb our trauma, and it's our responsibility to, I guess, help that next generation through.
And I think even just being able to have the discussions and the table, don't have to have the answers, but just actually communicating that everyone doesn't have to be okay every day is a huge step. You mentioned obviously trauma during the COVID period. COVID clearly threw up a whole raft of unforeseen challenges, and for you probably the other ladies will get to talk to it in a moment, but for you, your challenge is probably a little different to some of the others in the room. Do you maybe want to step us through where you were 12 months ago and to where you are now?
That's probably 18 months. I lose track of time. 18 months I was going into, well, actually two and a half years ago I was going to work in the city, and I was joking with these lovely ladies earlier that I had my vegan runners on and my jeans. And I think I probably need to put some different clothes on. But I decided to leave my corporate career. I probably knew a year before I actually did it that it was something I needed to do. But, it's probably 18 months now that I actually stepped out the doors and said, I know I will never go back to that world again, and it's not because it's not good for you or the other person, but for me, I just knew my time had come and I'd achieved all these things, but it wasn't actually, I didn't feel sincere in my purpose in that place anymore. And bizarrely, I found this revived passion for my initial world of psychology and mental health. And as well, I'd experienced firsthand, some of the trials and tribulations of that, which actually forced me to take some time out. It was, I think burnout is a real thing, and I certainly experienced what you probably define as burnout. So I put my business plan together, and I'd actually dipped my toe in the water of going around and meeting different practitioners in the wellness, health and wellness space. I really hate the word wellness, by the way, but I'll use it because everyone knows what it is. And I started to talk to practitioners that were looking to build their own business in that space, but perhaps didn't have the commercial understanding of how to bring it to life. And so for me, that was kind of like my step number one, is just because you want to, just because you're passionate about this world doesn't mean you have to all of a sudden be going out and teaching yoga every day, which I think sometimes is a bit of a misconception. It's like I'm either a corporate go-getter or I'm sitting in an ashram. No, it's not the case. And that's why I think I'm so passionate about what I do, is because I've actually been able to take what I've learned from a 20-year-long career and take it and turning it into something that, I believe is doing positive for the world. So I reckon it was August, not last August, the one before, we put our business plan together and we were set to open what really is like one of the most innovative spaces in Australia at the moment, which is the combination of all the ancient wisdom and practices that everyone's familiar with around meditation, breathwork and yoga, but also an acknowledgement that there's been a wealth of progression technologically wise and also therapeutically. There's an acknowledgement around what some modalities, and indulge me in not feeling that they're too woo-woo for you, but there is a wealth of research around the impact of sound and vibration in treating trauma and dis-ease in the body. So sound genuinely has the ability to rearrange your cellular networks. It's not like it happens once and then you're cured, but over time, traditional medicine is starting to acknowledge that, as well as light therapy. And light in particular has been been around for ages in terms of you go to get a facial and you have LED therapy. A lot of the football teams will use infrared for muscular rejuvenation and recovery. But again, without going into the detail, there are 3 different light spectrums that have been now found to impact mental health, digestion, sleep, etc. So I set out on this journey and we had an opening date of pretty much this time a year ago. And then I come from a marketing background, so I had my entire marketing plan down to the dollar. I was like, I've got everything set, my social marketing and my website. I'd arranged my local area marketing. I was like, okay, we don't need TV, but I just had everything organised. I I don't know the exact dates, but let's say like I think we were meant to open April 11, and then I think we all know it was literally like what 20th of March or something. Just have to hear these whispers like I think there's going to be a big, shutdown, and I was like, yeah, okay, keep going. What do we need to do to open? And then we all know how that ended. So 3 weeks before I was set to open, and this is like a big build, right? Like it's within a commercial area that I've invested every dollar of savings and dividends that I had earned through my corporate career along with my husband. He actually 5 years ago left the corporate world and was being an entrepreneur too. So now we're both in this sort of, oh shit, like he's running a small business, albeit 6 years down the track. I've now chosen to do this. We had our plan in place. We can't open. So to be honest, I was secretly kind of relieved, if I'm really going to be honest about it, because I think there's one thing having something on paper and then another actually having to deliver it when it's your own. And that's the other, so it's a really long story, but I'll wrap it up soon. I think one of my biggest learnings of this whole process is that even though I've learned so much and taken it with me, building something from scratch versus being in the roles that I were, there was just no comparison. So I had fear and I had anxiety, but I had a massive relief when they said shut the doors. That was 11th of April. So I had 3 months and I threw everything into continuing my psych studies and homeschooling and all the things we've all done. But we were excited again when it was opening, and we set a new date for July 16, whatever it was. We have a staff of like 25 people. As I said, it's in a big commercial district where we're one of the founding kind of brands with the property developers. And you wouldn't normally, I guess, have so much contact with them, but we'd all kind of put together. There's a big microbrewery opening next door. It was a Wednesday. I had a big advertising shoot on site with all the teachers. That was a Tuesday, Thursday. And then we hear Dan Andrews is having a conference. It was meant to open on the Friday. So we've gone from 3 weeks to 3 days and shut down again. So I think that time was totally different. Like there was a lot of, I think, to all this conversation, the general morale and feeling of hopelessness was really amongst our team, let alone having to try and manage it yourself. And my business partner, who is a more creative type, so having to manage her emotions as well. But yeah, that was the second time, and then we finally opened in November last year. Albeit, I'm so pumped about this business and what I believe it can do to help community connection, but it's been so tough. Like, it's not just the first lockdown and the second, but then it's Christmas time, then we've had another lockdown. People are just not, people's psyche has been really affected. It's kind of probably the best way of talking about it. And we see it every day, even in an industry that is actually designed to help it. That's my story. But I wouldn't have it any other way. I don't regret a single thing. It takes every bit of resilience every single day to wake up in the morning and look at my P&L and go, oh, God, we're 10 months behind. But belief, right? Like belief and hope and being able to actually acknowledge that you can have feelings that are seemingly contradictory. So I can be anxious and fearful and uncertain, but I can also be hopeful and motivated, and that's probably been my biggest learning from this whole process.
A great story around leadership, leadership for your family, for your staff, and for yourself. It's a really important thing to have touched on. Nicole, you probably had a very different experience to a lot of people in the room in relation to the last 12 months. I suppose it's really stating the obvious to say that your year was uniquely impacted to many other organisations, specifically because you were dealing with a perfect storm or perfect factor that you found yourself in terms of working in the organisation, being the Department of Health and Human Services at that point, that was leading in response to the pandemic, whilst obviously in the pandemic yourself and all the challenges that throws up personally, and also while the organisation was being heavily criticised for the response. And I suppose we could add a fourth one in there as well recently in terms of the restructure of the department. In your spare time?
In my spare time, and I know that I've got two of my team members online today, so I know that they'll be that they, my team were really feeling it as well as everyone in that department. So yes, I've started to call it the hat trick factor. So working in the organisation that's leading the response while living it yourself and being criticised for it. And I think what we saw, and I think particularly my team, given the role that we have in the department in terms of health, safety and wellbeing, is that the impact on particularly our clinical staff, but even more broadly where, when something like this happens, it is literally all hands on deck. So as a department, we actually processed 4,500 hires during the pandemic for our surge workforce. So our, broader people and culture group, for them it was all hands on deck, because where on earth do you get these people from? You're looking for very specific skills, and even when you've got those people, it never seemed to be enough. It was like we just couldn't. It felt like you couldn't get on top of it. And for those people particularly, case and contact tracing people, our infection prevention control nurses who were out and about around the time of the housing towers lockdown, and the list goes on and on and on. And what we found was our people were, being resilient, and a number of our people are, by the very nature of working in the Department of Health and Human Services, we are all there because we take the life of public service really seriously. That is our goal. Community is at the front of mind. I've been saying in the department for a long time, when you think about our vision is to enhance the health, safety and wellbeing of all Victorians, vulnerable Victorians, to lead a life they value. And I think what we forgot as an organisation last year is that actually we are Victorians too. And it was probably questionable about how many of us working in that space over that sustained period of time were actually leading a life that we valued. So for me, there were kind of two pivotal times where I really thought, oh yeah, okay, lady, just back it up. Just back it up, you have to stop. So the first was in May, where I was going in for some surgery. I'd been booked in, and then elective surgeries were cancelled. I was actually still in quite a bit of pain, even though it was an elective surgery. So I was like, okay. So then the next time it came around was May, and I knew I was in a bad spot when I thought I would rather be under a GA than continue to work in this. I am so happy to be going into hospital to have surgery and have a week off than to be working. I know this is going to sound really obvious, but massive alarm bells. Something's wrong. And then the second alarm bell for me was, it was around August, mid-August, and I was upstairs in my home office. And I was sitting at my desk, and I was having this feeling like I was going to black out. And I thought, I'm just tired, it's a late night, I've got all these things to do. And I remember holding onto my desk, really just saying to myself, don't black out, don't black out, hold on. I texted my husband, who was downstairs, to say, I'm not feeling that well. I feel like I'm going to black out. Can you just check on me in 15 minutes? Just keep an eye out. Or if you hear a bump, it's me. And I remember being on the Teams call with my exec team, and one of my colleagues, Michael, messaged me on the Teams chat and said, "You look like death." And then my boss got on. She was running late. She got on, and she also sent me a message saying, "You look like death," or something similar. And so I tapped out for the rest of that afternoon, and had a virtual check-in with my usual GP, and ended up taking about 8 days, a week and a bit off work. And it was really that sort of, for me, it was like, okay, so work is actually making me sick. And here I am, I'm the Chief OHS Officer, I'm the Head of Health and Wellbeing for the Department of Health and Human Services, and I let that run for too long. I did not listen to my red flags. I didn't understand the extent to which, I guess, what I call my crutches or my scaffolding. My scaffolding is making sleep a priority, making sure I do exercise every day, eating well, and I didn't realise how much, particularly the sleep and my exercise. I always thought, I really need sleep.
Anyway, I'll let you know as soon as I know.
I didn't realise how much I needed those things, and I ignored them. So they were two big wake-up calls for me. And then I guess the support that we put in place for our people who really were being, vilified, criticised in the media, the impact that had on them, on their day-to-day. We're really there just thinking, we are doing the best that we can for the community. This is what we come to live for, and we're being criticised for it. It was pretty difficult for my team and I to have those conversations with people, and the impact that had on them. We had people who were receiving death threats. We had people whose Facebook, people getting on their Facebook page, they happened to find out their name through the media or something like that, just for doing your job. That kind of stuff.
Okay.
So yes, it was quite a unique.
Yeah, no, it should be all. Actually, one of them you will find
This is those events, stay in 2020 and particularly around the more personal aspects of control and all those things in terms of staff. Jamy, in terms of 2020, everyone successful year for Luma, and you are up for your second Oscar nomination, is that?
No, we just missed out. It's quite painful for my team, but I think you don't make the movies for the Oscar accolades anyway.
That's still aim to be in the running.
It's
hard to get to.
Like I said, we gave a home to 150 artists globally, which was really, really nice for us, and we delivered 7 projects during that time, all remotely, which is unheard of. And I think that, making movies is a very collaborative effort. It's not a singular person that does it, it's a whole team. So I think one of the biggest challenges for us was how do we take that environment of people standing up and going over to a station and looking at a shot and be like, oh my God, Spider-Man looks amazing here. Spider-Man doesn't look so great over here. And because it's a real dialogue within our creatives and our artists. How do you take that and then do that online? And how do you make people really enjoy that process? Because much about art is kind of taking a step back and asking someone, what do you think? How do you think it looks? And to be able to replicate that just for work-wise was challenging, but we also pride ourselves on being an environment where one of our sort of mottos is mates, not colleagues, and we spend a ton of effort, ton of money and a ton of time in making sure that the environment that people come into our studios is actually one that it's like you're working with your friends. So how do you take that when everybody's remotely working? And we have Mario Kart competition every afternoon. We have this thing called Fika, which is like afternoon tea that my team makes, and people can come into the kitchen and eat, and people are staying back for beers. And when you take all of that away, and that's part and parcel of your work experience with us, that was really challenging. So again, I'm super fortunate to be surrounded by people who love what they do, but also we're kind of like, we're all in this together. So my team in particular were like online competitions, kind of sending out care packages, making sure that we were doing trivia on Zoom, sending out wine and beer, like kind of prizes. And we would run this weekly competition, like show us your work, like your work setup. And so like the best work setup would get a prize. And then, what was your best fika that you made at home, and like all of that kind of stuff. So all in all, I feel like we did a pretty good job at trying to replicate some of the really good stuff within our company and give the onus back to our crew to be able to be like, hey, you're a part of this, and it doesn't mean that I have to bake you a cake in the afternoon. Let's all bake a cake together, and then let's give whoever's cake is the best a prize. And so we tried to stay super positive, and we tried to really make sure that we were checking in with people a lot. And I think that that's been really successful. I think to be able to say we finished 7 projects, and some of them are like the biggest blockbusters that are coming out, that's no mean feat. And I think that that's, something that we can look back on and be really, really proud of. And you learn a lot. You learn about your team, you learn about your colleagues, you learn about your friends, like, all of that kind of stuff I think has been, a big success story for us.
If you knew what was coming, would you have done anything different?
Oh, 50,000. I definitely would have stocked up on more wine, that's for sure, instead of trying to chase toilet paper. I think one of the biggest things I would have done is probably have a one-on-one with everybody to see where they were at. So much of my role is kind of walking down the corridor and seeing someone like, that doesn't seem good today. I'm going to check in and, hey, want to come for a coffee? Or, sitting and listening to the supervisors give review notes and watching people's reactions to it, and then being able to be like, hey, really well done. Like, your shot looks amazing. Like, those are the things that you can you take for granted when you're working face to face. So had I known it was going to be this long, especially because I thought we were only going to roll off for 6 weeks. Like, it was that kind of thing where, the pandemic's hit, everybody go home, it'll be okay in 6 weeks, we're all going to be back in 6 weeks, and 12 months later, we're still at home. So I think I definitely would have done a one-on-one with people to see, do you have everything that you need? Are you okay? If you're living alone, is there someone that you can call? Do you have enough food in your fridge? And we did this funny thing where people were getting so stressed out about toilet paper that we started getting that toilet paper from our studio. So people, it was one less thing for them to worry about. But, my role is to really, if I had to summarize it, I always say my role is to make our people happy. And one of the things about keeping people happy is checking in and listening and preempting what I feel like is going to come my way. So that and better internet service. Like when you have people dialing in and their job is to do things online and they're cutting out every 5 seconds, just those stresses I wish we had been able to foresee and help out, and giving people ergonomic chairs at the beginning, all of that kind of stuff. I think, there's a whole checklist. Yeah, we have this now. Pandemic checklist, just in case in my lifetime we have another episode like this. There's a whole list of things that my team has put together to say these are the things that you ask first and foremost. And one of them, the first one is, are you okay? Yeah, are you doing okay?
It's great. It's a great reference that you make, and it is down to I think as organisations, as leaders, sometimes we can look to try and answer the complex rather than focusing on the basics to keep people on straight and narrow, keep them happy and healthy, which you all articulated today is all extremely important. So the overarching theme for International Women's Day for 2021 was to choose to challenge. And in the last 12 months, we've seen a groundswell of women speaking up about imbalances and challenging the status quo in the workplace. We've all spoken today about some, more particular and unique challenges, and challenges that, can make it more difficult to access stretch opportunities, network resources, whether it be themselves, teams, etc. In your view, what are some of the systemic challenges, and or I suppose what role can our male advocates and managers play in addressing these challenges? I think we've all got very different approaches and thoughts to it. Not wanting to still pick on you, Jamy, but I know that Luma do have a particularly different approach in respect of how you engage.
Yeah, we have this sort of policy that to empower women, you have to empower the men. And I know that sounds very bad, but it's actually not. We have this idea that, our industry is made up of 70% men and 30% women, and 30% of the women workforce are usually in kind of the support, what they call support areas, production, coordination, producing, not very much the technical, the artistry, and I think that kind of has to start with schools and, kind of education forums and all that kind of stuff. But what we tend to do is our supervisors have to go through a ton of reels, like creative reels that people have done work on. They've either gone out and shot something on their iPhone or reels of projects that they've worked on in the past for other companies. And we have this system where the supervisors that review it don't actually get to see a name, a sex or a location allocated to that reel. So they're just purely looking at the art form and not the person attached to it. And we have this kind of system where they kind of review these reels and, they'll say to the HR or the recruiting manager, these are the people that I like. And then the HR person goes and interviews them first, just to see if they're a cultural ad, whether they're available, all of that kind of stuff. And then the conversation with the supervisor starts about what kind of work we're working on, what we expect out of this artist. So it takes a bias out of like an all boys club where you feel like a guy could possibly do that job because it's more technical or it's a little bit more advanced, like science-wise or whatever that may be. We do that. And then once a female comes into our studio, we have a buddy program, what we call a buddy program, and we always attach them to a really amazing male figure so that person can now be a champion for that female that's coming to the workforce. We used to do it the other way around. We used to always partner girls up with girls and guys up with guys, and it just then ends up forming a bit of a divide. So when you have these really great leads or supervisors or managers that are empowering the women to be able to kind of be a part of that workforce, it changes the dialogue completely. And then in our performance reviews, we always have this section called empathy, and you get scored on your empathy. And it's basically about how are you relating back to your colleagues? Are you understanding them and using the right language? Are you supporting them in that way? Are you putting yourself in their shoes? And for a male supervisor to go into a review with a female artist to understand that there may be different challenges if they're about to become a mother or any one of those things, we have this empathy scale so that we keep our leaders accountable for those sorts of things. And so what we've seen is then you start to kind of figure out that there's no real divide between the females and the males at our work. There's just a group of really talented artists, and you talk like you're just talking to a group of talented artists. And I think what has also been really good about that is there's no wrong or right question. We really get our mouths to kind of go, ask whatever you want to ask, because it's the only way you're going to learn how to be better. And that's been really, I think, good to see that, supervisors going into these conversations saying, I think she's really upset and I don't know what to do. And, there may be a different emotional reaction from a female, but trying to help guide them and saying that that's not a weird question to ask, and if you don't have the tools, here are the tools to be able to help in that situation, has just, allowed our people to elevate to the next level.
No, I think the empathy scorecard, it's a great one, and it's about that I suppose removing divide and empowering both parties. So thank you for that. In the context of Choose to Challenge, are there any roles that you see male actors can perform or you see work well, or any systemic challenges that?
I mean, my industry now is so completely the flip, right? So I work I'm part of an industry now. It's like 90% female. Yeah, so it's interesting when I hear these conversations because I come from a very different view, even though I want to answer as part of my my previous world. I mean, a couple of things. I think we touched on this earlier. I feel like the men that certainly we see in our industry and the ones coming up through the workplace now, I believe, are really different. And I see the difference in their thinking patterns and their behaviours to what I certainly experienced. Sometimes, not all the time, so I don't want to make major generalisations in my corporate life. And so I feel really encouraged of the equanimity of conversation. Like sometimes I see just two people, like, you know, everyone in this industry is sort of super consciously aware of everything, and I see my teams speaking with even other teachers, and the guys are just as evolved as the women are, and are able to interact. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but yeah, the men have this vulnerability factor about them that I haven't seen before. What's right or wrong, I don't know. I'm not suggesting everybody needs to be like that, but I think that's probably just my observation of this industry in particular, is that I see a much greater desire from men to be more open to not always having to be strong all the time and not always having to have the answer, and being open to their own self-worth, being open to release kind of anger and stuff that then come up day to day. So yeah, that's probably just one observation. The other thing though that I feel like in this space is sometimes missed is that I don't feel like it's just specific to the gender thing, right? Like I had some pretty horrific experiences being on the receiving end of female leaders as well. And so I feel like the conversation for me, probably needs to be just about leadership in general and how we kind of, I was on the receiving end of quite masculine-based women who didn't necessarily treat me that well. And so I think, there is something about how we bring in that empathy gene to anybody, not just a gender conversation.
No, I think it's a great call out, and maybe just conscious of the time. On that note, maybe we can hear from you more finally, just around perhaps what's one piece of advice you give to the leaders here today, and I suppose acknowledging that leadership is not informal. It's not always someone that you report to. Informal leadership obviously is present in many situations, be there personally or professionally. So a bit of advice. Nicole, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think that vulnerability. So if you are a people leader, or as you say, a leader amongst your colleagues, or whatever that looks like for you, be prepared that you're going to have to give a little piece of yourself. You need to give a piece yourself, because that's where the connection and the trust building lies. I think listening is underrated as a skill. And it's the simple things like we are also adept and habit forming of, hi, how are you? Do we actually stop and take the time to hear what the other person's response is in terms of how they actually are? And then the other thing, I think, for me, in terms of leadership as a people manager, is that every role that I've ever been in terms of senior leadership, one of my core reasons for being is to empower my team, encourage them to take up their own personal authority, because ultimately what I'm striving for is to make myself redundant. That is the point. That is how you help people, male or female, to step into their own as well. So ultimately, time in a leadership role, it should have a finite end, and then you move on to the next thing because you've brought people along and it's time to go.
So like you said, thinking.
I think you should care
care more than you actually think you should. I read this really great line that, you know, leadership is an action and not a title, and I live by that. I don't think that you need to be the CEO to be a leader. I have a wonderful group of like junior artists that are just like the best leaders on the floor, and I learn things from them. So I think that when you care enough for the work that you do, you know, the company that you work for and the people that you work with, I think that that sets a really great foundation for you to do your best work. So like Nicole said, like you can ask people how they're going, but if you don't care for the answer, then don't ask it. Yeah, just don't ask it. But I think that if you care for the team and the work that you're doing, then you're naturally going to want to care for the people that you're surrounding yourself with. So I think that leadership can come in all shapes and all sizes and at any different level. And I think that the more the actual titles of leadership, like your C-suites and your managers, involve people who don't have those titles, the better that it will be.
Thank you. Any final thoughts on that?
A mentor once said to me, "How do you wear who you are?" And for me, that kind of personally just rings really true. And I guess first of all, it starts with knowing your why and not being attached to people, companies, but being attached to your why and your purpose, and then looking at how you wear it. It's being authentic to it. I feel like leadership, people gravitate towards authenticity and somebody who understands who they are and why they're here. We all want to be part of sincerity, right?
Fantastic, and I think they're all wonderfully well thought out sentiments, and I'd like to thank all three of you. You've been very generous, not only with your time today, but also to your stories and reflections and, you know, sharing a bit of yourselves, vulnerabilities and all, with all of us, so thank you. Kate, do you have time for questions?
We do. We've got two actually up on the screen. One of them is making me giggle a little bit because I think there'll be some interesting answers here. But what's the worst piece of advice you've ever been given?
From Carly.
That really springs to mind.
It's not the worst piece of advice, but I had someone who actually said to me during, "Why are you crying?" Because I was quite emotional. And I kind of stopped and I was like, "I'm crying because that is my reaction right now." But it kind of made me stop and be like, well, this person is saying like crying is either a form of like weakness or it's like derailing this conversation. And I actually said, "I'm crying because I care. I care enough that it's making me physically like upset," and it shut him right down. But I don't actually think that any piece of advice I've been given is bad, because sometimes even the bad stuff leads to good stuff. Like I've had people who kind of have told me they think that I should do it a certain way, or they think that I should be focusing on different things. But, you know, I take that and, you know, the people that you work with and you surround yourself with, they're your audience. So if even the bad pieces of advice, if they're invested enough to try and give it to you, you've got to take something from it, right? And either it will spur you on to be like, "I'm going to prove you wrong," like, and I'm going to make sure that this month I'm going to like be better about it and, you know, kind of make you eat your words, versus, you know what, I'm actually going to take that on board and see how I can implement it. So I don't think I've been given bad advice whatsoever. Yeah.
Nicole, Elisa, particular bad advice that springs to mind?
Bad advice. I remember walking out of a meeting with our CEO, won't name the company, and they didn't have a particularly great reaction to something I'd said in the meeting that was my perspective on in my area. And we walked out and my boss said to me, "Yeah, they don't like it when you talk about the good things the competitor has been doing. So maybe next time just don't mention if you have not," because I was saying, you know, we should really be looking towards what they do, because there was this culture of just slamming the competitor. And so my boss said to me, "Yeah, next time you go into a meeting with this person, don't if you've got an opinion on anything good that this competitor's doing, I wouldn't mention it." And I walked out and I was just like, not that it was advice, I could take it or leave it, but I just remember walking out there and, what? Like, who? Yeah. Anyway, that's what sprang to mind.
I can't think of anything specific, but I think for me, I'm always really interested around advice that I get from people who maybe don't have the particular SME expertise that I have. So I'm always willing to take on feedback. But when you've got somebody else who actually doesn't understand the particular discipline and they're saying, well, no, don't say that, and it's within your realm of expertise, I struggle a lot with that. and just, sort of have to practice what the response might be, because I think, there's something to be said about your sixth sense, your gut feeling, whatever that is, and particularly if you are an expert in a particular field. And it usually is around raising a particular risk, it might be the board, it might be, and so others around you getting a bit toey around, well, you can't say, don't say that. So just, I guess, trusting that gut to go, well, my role as an SME is to, this is precisely what the board needs to know so that they can make informed decisions. What they do with that is a matter of them. So I think it's not really words advice, it's just being attuned to what you take on or what you don't, and being prepared to stand behind that. What's your, I guess, reasoned decision making for standing behind.
Yeah, just doesn't get a bit of age. Okay,
There is one, but it might actually be quite a long answer. What do you think are the key challenges for women in the workforce, either as employees or being self-employed, over the next 5 years, and how do we overcome them?
I suppose in the interest of time, is there any sort of one particular thing that springs to mind in terms of forward-looking challenges for the workforce?
I think flexibility is one. I think that, and not just for women, but I think for men as well, the flexibility of being able to work from home, I think everybody's got kind of the benefits of that. And I think, if you're forced to go back into a workforce where, you can't pick up your kids, or I don't even have kids, and I've seen my friends have toy poodle, which, like that in itself is like a lot of work. I'm really actually, I'm pretty fortunate that I can actually take her into the studio, but I think the flexibility, if you take that away from the workforce, it just reduces the amount of people that can get the opportunity to do their best work for a company that believes in the person and not just the role itself. So if we go back to having to be a 9 to 5 in the office only 5 days a week, I think that's going to pose a lot of problems for women who have found a really great opportunity during this COVID time.
Do you have anything you want to add?
It's not only specific to women, but just know your boundaries and and I don't think that in a controversial way, but know what you want, where your boundary is for giving, where it is, where you start to work outside your boundaries in terms of your life and what you want to get out of it. I think, it's something, it's a constant life journey.
And I think it's a very relevant point. I think that one of the upsides has been, over the past 12 months, has been the flexibility. Certainly themes like the Choose to Challenge theme of the International Women's Day this year has certainly, and continued International Women's Day and other programs, advocacy and mentor programs, continue to really open up opportunities for females. But I suppose one of the challenges is for females also to recognise they don't to, I suppose, coin Quentin Bryce's words, you don't have to do everything can't have it all at once. We don't have to have it all at once. So we're giving yourself permission to take it in stages or to do bits at different time as it resonates with your work-life balance. And the one for males is support us. Well, thank you. Is there any questions from the floor?
Yeah, well, Jamy, just related to the culture, with the 150 people starting during COVID, how did you install the culture and how did you sort of get them to build that, given I think culture is one of the most important parts of having a successful workforce?
Yeah, I'm really fortunate. I have a people and culture team that spans both LA and Melbourne, and we're a group of 8. And in all honesty, every single one of them wakes up every day and says, what good can I do today? who can I make happy? And that is the mantra. So I don't care if they get 0 work done and they come back to me and say, I was just on Zoom all day talking to 25 people. If that's what they have to do to keep people happy, we encourage that. Technology, oh my God, we've bought every piece of software, if I could have invested in Zoom in February, I would be really rich and I wouldn't be here. I'd probably be on an island somewhere, because the amount of Zoom that we use in our company has been kind of the real glue that's kept us together. So, we run online competitions. We've done this kind of real great virtual kind of dinner thing that we do. We send out packages, we send out care packages every so often to make sure that people are okay. We make it fun too, so we kind of have this choose your own adventure, choose your care package thing. It could be a pot plant, it could be bourbon, it could be sweet. One of them was a yoga mat and one of those shows how much I exercise, one of those foam rolling things. And then every Friday we have this thing called Beer 30. And in person, it's sharing a beer on a Friday afternoon so you can have a bit of chat. But my God, my team will get on there and there'll be dress up and there will be trivia and, coupled with all the fun stuff, it's really about, we make this concerted effort to check in on people to see how they're going, and then we kind of figure out what to do really on a personal, person-to-person basis. So there are times where if we know someone's doing overtime and they have 2 dogs, we'll send a dog walker to their house so that they don't have to worry about their dogs. We send laundry vouchers to people so they don't have to do their laundry on a Saturday if they've had a particularly hard week. We will send out massage vouchers, so you can get a massage. We also invested heavily in an EAP so people have someone else to talk to during this time. And then we really make a concerted effort to just keep that communication alive. So for any of you who are gamers or who have kids or friends that are gaming, there's a thing called Discord, which is kind of a really high-tech walkie-talkie that you can kind of press in and out of and talk to people. So we'll create these groups where people can go in and just have a bit of fun. And so we've again, I have 8 people in my team who are very, very conscious about making sure that people are well looked after, and it spans from the fun stuff to the serious stuff. But every day there's a new kind of initiative, just something new that we're working on to make sure that it's keeping that kind of energy alive. So it's hard, but it's also interesting how, we've been able to kind of pivot from doing it on a people-to-people basis to everything going offline.
I suppose it's demonstrating the listening which Nicole referred to. We don't do enough of before we actually engage. Yeah. Thank you all. Thank you for everyone that dialed in, and also for everyone doing it today. And most importantly for our representatives. So, thank you.